Okay.
My phone.
Hello, everyone. How are we doing today? We are here with the tea teacher as myself. Some may know us. My name is Sugar Mama on other platforms, but we also have Tori from the Tori Donald Show here with us today. But y'all, I know y'all probably like, oh girl, you got it going on. We have the famous, famous Freda Payne on here with us today. It's amazing. It's amazing to have not only just jazz, but other areas of the music industries and even theater. How are you doing today, Miss Payne?
I'm doing just fine. I'm doing I just came, my birthday was Monday, and
Yes.
I've been celebrating since Sunday. And so I'm just kind of like coming down from that.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Yes. Happy birthday. It's amazing. As they say, our skin don't never crack because you look
Black,
amazing.
hey, as Jennifer Lewis, she wrote a song once called Black Don't Crack. And then she kicked her leg up.
Still looking beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes. So,
I was
Tori,
thinking,
you want?
go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, no, ma'am. Go ahead.
I was just thinking, I said, Jennifer Lewis has been kicking her leg up for a long time now. And now, believe it or not, she's kicking higher than she did before, like 20 years ago. I said, girl, what are you doing?
What kind of vitamins are you taking?
You're right. You must be doing a lot of good stretching. Who are you working out with?
Well, Tori, since you are one of our guests on the tea teacher today, you have anything to ask Miss Payne?
I do. Hello, Miss Payne. I'm
Hi.
I am so fascinated by you. You're a certified bona fide jazz singer, and I was just wondering what your experiences were like with Duke Ellington. Yes. And your connection, your 6 degrees of separation with Ella Fitzgerald. Like, you actually met your idol and you get to play her, and you did.
Yes.
So I was just wondering, like.
I know. I met Duke Ellington when I was 17, and how it came about was his son, Mercer Ellington, was a guest at my house in Detroit. And he was a guest, and it was a neighbor. He was our neighbor, and he was an attorney. His name was Alan Early Jr., and he was really good friends with my parents. So he met Mercer Ellington at a cocktail party. And one thing led to another. He started telling Mercer about his neighbor's daughter who sang, and she's just 17, but she's really good or whatever, And he said he wanted him to hear me sing. So he agreed, and he came by the house. I sang for him. He says, "Oh, you're really good." He says, "I want my dad to hear you." It just so happens that he was with his father, Duke Ellington, who was in town, and he and the band were performing at a theater in Detroit. And so they arranged to take me to the hotel. He was staying at the Gotham Hotel, which was a Black hotel in Detroit. We're talking about, I'll give you the year. This had to be around 1950. Well, I was 17. So it was like 1961. 1960, 1961, and maybe 1960 still. And they took me to the hotel, and he had a piano in his suite. So he played for me while I sang a couple of his songs, like I Got It Bad and That Ain't Good and something else. And he turned around and said, you remind me of Lena Horne. He says, I want to hear you with the band. The only problem is that we're leaving in the morning to go to Pittsburgh to perform there for a week. And if somebody, your mother, your dad can drive you to Pittsburgh, I'd be happy to bring you up on stage to sing with the band.
Oh, wow.
So that's what happened. My mother, it was me, my mother, and also my mentor. His name was Mac Ferguson. He was a pianist, and he was my mentor. He worked with me a lot. And we drove to Pittsburgh, And Duke called me up and I sang a few songs with the big band. And then he's invited me later on. He sent a contract. He mailed a contract to our home, and he wanted me to sign. There was a contract that would have been 10 years to be his band singer. And so his next engagement from Pittsburgh was to go to Las Vegas. And there he was performing at the Riviera Hotel in the lounge, big band. That's back then in Vegas, that was common. You could go and see Stan Kenton. Stan Kenton would be at the Flamingo Hotel playing in the lounge. You know, people like Sarah Vaughan would be singing in the lounge. Della Reese would be singing in the lounge. I think the only Black singers I think that performed in the big rooms were like Pearl Bailey, Lena Horne, people like that. And then later on, when Dionne Warwick started getting all those hits, I mean, a string of hits, then you would see her in the big room. So that's how it was back then. And then what happened was I got to sing with him again in Vegas, like one time. And I didn't sign the contract because he didn't want to change anything in the contract. And being that our neighbor, Alan Early, was a lawyer, he read it and he said, you know, there's certain things, this contract is too long. It shouldn't go beyond your 21st birthday. It has to be renegotiated. You have to have a guardian, blah, blah, blah. You know, long story short, that never occurred, but I got to meet him and I got to sing with the band. And then years later, we're talking 1982 into 83, I got booked to be one of the headliners in Duke Ellington's Sophisticated Ladies. He was gone by then. And, you know, became a hit on Broadway, Duke Ellington's Sophisticated Ladies. And I got to do the Vegas run of that. That lasted for like 8 months at the Desert Inn. And then I got to do one of the national touring companies. And I got to do it in Europe as well. And I wound up doing about 6 different companies of Duke Ellington's Sophisticated Ladies over a span of, let's say, 20 years. Wow. So that's amazing. So I said to myself, some nights I'd walk on stage and I would look behind them, you know, there'd be a back scrim and they'd have a big picture of his head with a black top hat on, and I would look at that and I would think to myself, well, Duke, you finally got me.
You finally got me on stage.
You finally got me.
Wow. So where did your music background come from? Did you start off in the church? Was your parents singers?
No, my parents were not singers. I sang in the church. I never was in the choir. I never wanted to be in the church choir. Occasionally I would sing in church. I would be asked to sing a solo in church. But I really started out entering talent contests.
And was it the Ted Mack?
Yeah, there was Ted Mack. That was when I was 16, but I was winning talent contests in Detroit before I did Ted Mack. And that started when I was 13. And I won talent contest that was on TV in Detroit. And it was called the Ed McKenzie Dance Hour. And there it was like Dick Clark. It was Dick Clark all over, the same format, the kids, the pop music, the white kids, and then if they had a star in town who was working at one of the top nightclubs, you'd have like Adela Reese, or you'd have like Sammy Davis Jr., or people like that, or whoever, the 4 freshmen come and really do a number on the show. And when I won, they featured a talent contest, because it wasn't just the music and the kids dancing, but they also had a talent contest that was part of the show. And I was on there once and I won, and then they called me back 6 months later to be on it again. I guess that was just to see if I would win again, and I won again. So, so that kind of got me thinking, well, I must be all right. I must be.
But weren't you influenced by your uncle too? He taught you
Oh,
how to
my
play.
uncle. I had my uncle. See, my uncle Johnny died when I was 9. And that was devastating because it was because of Uncle Johnny. He introduced me. I don't think he knew what he was doing, but maybe he did. He had a record collection. He had Duke Ellington records. He had B.B. King records. He had Lionel Hampton. And it was mostly the Duke. And then he had classical music.
Mm-hmm.
He had, which was unusual for a Black family at that time. And he wasn't into like playing the piano that much, but he had classical records. He liked music. And also he was an amateur tap dancer. He was an amateur tap dancer. My mother used to tell me that he would go to the clubs and let's say tap dance for free, but people would throw money on stage at him. And he would bring his money home and he'd throw it on the bed and tell her to take what she wanted. That was her brother. That was Uncle John. That was her brother. He died young. He died from TB.
Oh my Lord.
Well, back then TB was the disease that was killing a lot of people. My mother's father, who would have been my grandfather, he died from TB before my mother was even born. My grandmother was pregnant with my mama. And she said that she never got to, see him, of course, And so my grandfather died from TB. My blood uncle died from TB. And this was, my grandfather, he would have died in the 30s. And then my uncle, he died, I was 9. Oh, so it was like around 1950. So he died in the 40s, like late 40s, like either 1950. Yeah, because I was 9 when he died, and I was born. I'm giving my age away. Everybody knows anyway. I was born in 1942. Okay. So you do the math.
How was it working with Bill Cosby?
I love working with Bill Cosby. It was nice. I never realized how funny he really was.
Yeah.
Because you see, he was one of those comedians that didn't use a lot of vulgarity. That's what I respected about him. And I worked with him twice, once in Chicago at Mill Run outside of Chicago. It was a theater in the Round. And I remember because my son was a baby that he was about 15 months old or somewhere around there. I don't think he was quite, I don't know, maybe he wasn't quite a year old, but he may have been about a year old when I worked with him. And I remember being in the dressing room, and then one night I said, let me go and stand in the wings and listen to Bill. And I did, and he was cracking me up. I said, Bill is really funny. He's really good, And then I worked with him again in Cleveland.
Wow. Yeah, he is very funny. Even though he's up in age now, but I watched the reruns, the Fat Albert and Cosby Show and things like that. And so, yeah, he was very comical, very comical.
And he was very nice, very, like people would say, did he ever hit on you? I said, no, he never was out of line with me. He was never out of line with me, never.
I'm sorry, you said no.
I guess he must have been out of line with some other women, but not me.
She said, no way. Wow. That's interesting. That's interesting. Even your music, it's interesting. The Band of Gold, I watched that video, I don't know how many times. And my mother-in-law, she watched even when you was on the Soul Train doing the Band of Gold, and the way it just belted out like it was just meant to be. That song was just meant to be out there for everyone to hear it. I mean, it was beautiful. I love that song. Tori, what about you? You like it?
Yeah, I love it. And
I gotta like it. hey, that's a song that put me on the map, you know?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I love it. I love it. I mean, I sing it a lot, you know, I mean, when I do my personal appearances,
Mhm.
I do it. Yeah. In
Well,
my
you see
night, you
people
know.
like some artists, they have to, they auto tune or they lip sing. But to me, back in those days, y'all used y'all's voice. Y'all had talent. It was there. It wasn't forced. And the way you sung that song, it just flowed out like, you know, a stream of water. It was beautiful. I mean, you
Mm,
hit every note, every ripple. I was like, really, you know, listening because, you know, the Soul Train was a rerun back in, I'm the early 80s baby. So it was a rerun back in my days. And when I
right.
saw you on that, I was like, oh my God, you know, as a little kid, just trying to move and do the same thing. And but it was natural. It's like it just came
Mhm.
out wonderfully. I did. I really enjoyed that.
She
Thank
also
you.
did a remix with Belinda Carlisle.
Yes, she did.
Oh yeah, she wanted to, her manager called me, what's his name? Ron Stone. And he said, Belinda wanted to do Band of Gold, wanted to do a, you know, to cover, you know, a cover on it. And then he asked me would I get involved in singing with her. And then we did Solid Gold. That, remember the TV show Solid Gold? I think Dionne Warwick was the first one that she was the first hostess of that TV show. And then after Dionne left, they got Marilyn McCoo. And she, I think Marilyn was, I think, was the hostess when I was on with Belinda Carlisle. And then we also did a special, and it was called Legendary Ladies of Rock. And that was on Cinemax, which is a part of HBO. And this was back in the 80s, and it was called Legendary Ladies of Rock. And it was Grace Slick, it was everybody. It was Martha Reeves, Mary Wells, Brenda Lee. Oh my God, you can. It was a bunch. It was a bunch of us. All I can say, a bunch of ladies. Yeah. Mhm.
That was really cool. That's like pre-Divas, like the Divas concerts where they brought all the divas together. The special that you did is kind of
Oh,
similar to that.
oh, you mean with Shirley Ralph?
Oh no, the Divas concert where they had the Divas live and they had all the R&B divas. They had like Whitney Houston,
Oh
Tina.
yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, that was good. That was really good. Yeah.
You yourself a rock and roll artist because you are um featured in a rock and roll documentary, and they always you're like you do a lot of genres of music. So do you consider yourself rock too?
I sing. I can sing rock. I can sing. I don't consider myself rock. I consider myself, I would say, jazz, R&B, pop, jazz, R&B, pop.
That's amazing.
Hmm.
That's
And
that's unique too.
Broadway too. So
Yeah.
Well, because you
And
have
that's
a great voice and do multiple music, I was wondering if people like, yeah, Frida's rock and roll too, and you're like, yeah.
yeah, well, I can do. I mean, I can sing rock. I can do it. I just adapt myself to it. That's all.
Okay.
Hmm.
so what made you want to not just stick to one certain label? Uh
Because my soul and my talent would like can venture over and do other things.
mhm.
That's what it is, you know. And also, lucky. I mean, I have to put it in. They remember that old saying, "Lucky is the mouse who has more than one hole to run into."
That is.
That's how I look at it. I've got more than one place genre to deal with. I don't have to stick to one thing.
Mhm, mhm.
I
I think
remember
it's what.
Charlie. I
Go
remember
ahead.
Charlie Pride. You know, the country and western singer.
Mhm.
Charlie Pride. Charlie was at that time, he was like the only Black male country and western singer who really was famous back from as far back as the 60s. And I met him, this was in the 80s or was it the 70s? And he had come to see me with Sammy Davis Jr. at Harrah's in Lake
Mhm.
Tahoe. And this had to be in the mid 70s. And he was already famous himself. And he said, in his accent, he says, "You sang that jazz really good." He says, I couldn't sing jazz if they had me tied to a pole and beat me to death. He just can't do. Some people just can't do it. I can do it. I can switch gears and do it. I can sing jazz. I can sing R&B. I can sing rock.
And that's unique because a lot of artists can't do that. They just stuck in one category and cannot expand to different other categories. We only just R&B, where to me, having one hole, like you said, for a mouse to go into is better because you have more variety of different things that you can do and expand. You can hop over. You're not just stuck in one label. And to me, that's
right.
that's good because you do a little bit of jazz, you do a little bit of R&B, soul, classical, and which is wonderful.
Right.
Yeah, which is very, very much. And even your book is amazing. I know my co-host Tori, she has read that book 3 times almost.
What, Tori? Let me ask you a question. What, in your opinion, interested you the most? What stood out or kind of shocked you the most?
Well, the possibility that she could have been our first lady. Well, I wasn't thought of then, but I was like, I wonder what if Freda was the first lady, what programs would we be doing today in 2022?
Well, honey, let me tell you something. Back then, it was my fantasy. It was my fantasy. And but I was like a prophet. I must have been a prophetess because we wound up having a first lady. It may not have been interracial, but we wound up having a first lady, Michelle Obama.
In a way, you paved the way for a lot of.
But I mean, this would have been 70 when that happened. What year was that when I met him, John Tunney? 1971 or 72. Back then, that would have been a total fantasy. It would have been a total fantasy that people said never will happen. That would never happen. They'll never stand for it. They'll never stand for it. And I remember my friend who was my road manager, and also he was sort of like my mentor as well. We were closer than just road manager. We were like very close friends. And he was very spiritual and very intuitive. And he said, Freda, and he was very smart, and he was from DC originally, Georgetown. He said, Freda, your life would be miserable. He said they'd be following you, they'd be making up stories, they'd be humiliating you behind your back or in front of your face, and then of course I think, and it would have been bad for John Tunney too. He was a United States Senator. It would have been bad for him too. It wouldn't be good. It wouldn't have been good for his career at all. So it was my fantasy. I imagined it, because I was in love. I was like, oh, I'm in love with him, that kind of thing.
I also liked how, in a way, well, not in a way, you did pave a way for current artists today, like Jennifer Hudson. You were the first to do a TV show, Today's Women, I think it was called.
Today's Black Woman.
Yes.
It was a talk show. It was and I had guests. I had different guests of note, like Maya Angelou, Vernon Jordan, Shirley Chisholm, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Natalie Cole, blah, 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 and then I explored different community issues, like I did a show on rape. Somebody had written a book on rape. It's not a crime of passion. It's really a crime of violence. It's an aggressive thing. It's not about a person just wanting to have sex. It's like a violent thing. It's more about violence than it is like love and compassion. And whereas I used to think rape had something to do with just wanting to have sex, but it's more than that. It's like
yes, ma'am.
Yeah, it's more of an aggressive, violent thing. Like they want to hurt you. They really want to hurt you. They don't really want to make you feel good.
No, they don't.
So there you go. We women have to be very, very careful about who we hang out with.
our surroundings, because we never know who's out there trying to hurt us.
You never know.
You never know. Well, we have 4 minutes and 44 seconds left in our 30-minute interview.
Okay. What do you want to know? What do you want to
Well, how was it with Quincy Jones?
Well, when I met Quincy, I had just recently come to New York. I was 18 and I met him in a restaurant. At the time, it was called Sapphires. It was owned by a Black man by the name of Danny Sims. And Quincy was performing in New York on the East Side at a club called Basin Street East with his big band. And he came to that restaurant like after the show was over, after hours, because it stayed open late, with his friend Jerome Robinson, who was a sax player. And I was introduced to him, and he was immediately attracted to me, and so he invited me to come and see his show, which I did. And we sort of got involved. He was he was 28. So he's exactly 8 years older than me. And I fell in love with him. I fell in love, and he fell in love with me. But I didn't take him seriously, even though I was, he had my nose open. But because I didn't see a future. He was married at the time. Oh. And I just felt like, oh my goodness. It's, this man is married, and I kind of knew that he was fooling around with other women too. But over the years, and we're still friends to this day. And he'll come to see if I'm appearing here in LA, he'll come and see my show. I'll invite him. He'll come to see my show. So we're still friends. And then in 2008 or 9, he invited me to perform at the Montreux Jazz Festival. I think it was like in honoring his 75th birthday.
Well, that's good. Y'all still can remain friends.
Yeah, we're friends. Oh, we're still friends. Yeah.
Sweet. Well, we have 2 minutes and 16 seconds. Would you please grace us with a piece of a song that you sung back in the early days?
Back in the day?
Yes, ma'am.
Let's see. Ask me, how do I feel? Ask me how now that we're cozy and clinging. Well, sir, all I can say is if I were a bell, I'd be ringing. From the moment we kissed tonight, that's the way I've gotta behave, boy. If I were a lamp, I'd light. Or if I were a banner, I'd wave. Ask me, how do I feel? Ask me now, when we're silently clinging. Well, sir, all I can say is if I were a gay, I'd be swinging. And if I were a watch, don't you know I'd be popping my springs. Or if I were a bell, yeah. Yes, if I were a bell. If I were a bell, I'd go ding dong, ding.
Oh, sweet.
Beautiful.
Thank you so much. And before we end our interview, Tori, do you have anything to say real quick?
I'm going to be
I love your albums.
Thank you.
Your book is great. I can't wait for a movie to come out. Are you going to come out with another book?
I probably will wind up coming out with another book. Yeah. Probably not right away, but within maybe another year from now or so. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Do you have any upcoming events you want to let us know about?
Well, I'll be in Detroit on the 27th, and I'll be performing there for the YMCA. They're having a big benefit in Detroit